and welcome to the Support for Caregiver Awareness, Learning, and Empowerment, or SCALE, 8-week webinar series that aims to empower you with practical information and skills by enhancing your self-awareness and focusing on your own needs to improve your mental health as a caregiver. My name is Joy McLeod, and I became a caregiver in 2015 after my dad sustained a high-level spinal cord injury. I discovered the Ontario Caregiving Organization during the pandemic and have been volunteering with their peer support program since 2022. As you know by now, I'm incredibly passionate about SCALE, and I'm so glad that you've joined us today for the second last session. Today's webinar is Setting Boundaries Within the Caregiver Relationship. Balancing your needs with those of your care recipient is often a significant challenge for caregivers who are caregiving. Today's webinar will discuss the emotions involved in boundary setting and will support you in establishing healthier, more balanced relationships. Before we begin, I wanted to take a moment to share that the OCO carries out its work while acknowledging the Indigenous peoples of all the lands that we are on today. This land is home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, and acknowledging this reminds us that our great standard of living is directly related to the resources and friendship of Indigenous people. So I'm going to jump right in and introduce our speaker. Today's speaker, her name is Michal Goldstein. She's a clinical social worker and therapist with over 15 years of experience in supporting individuals, couples, and families to build stronger, healthier, and more meaningful relationships. She is also the owner and founder of Creating Connections Counseling Services, a virtual therapy practice based out of Toronto, where she and her team of therapists help individuals and families to reconnect and thrive, even within their challenging life experiences. Michal's professional understanding of the impact of caregiving on one's health and well-being, and her personal caregiving experiences led to her extensive work with the Ontario Caregiver Organization and fuels her passion to support caregivers to navigate their challenging circumstances. Thank you so much for joining us today, Michal, and I'll pass it over to you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Joy. It's a pleasure to be back here this week. We are now in the 7th week of our webinar series, joining together every Tuesday to discuss different aspects of your caregiving journey, different emotions that so often come up while you're caregiving, and to address and try to work on some skills that we can use to help ourselves within this journey. Another aspect of this program is the group support and the individual counseling that we offer through Creating Connections. The group support still has some room, but the individual counseling right now is full. I do encourage you, though, to follow the resources on the next page to be able to access the individual counseling by putting yourself on the wait list if spots become available, or just to connect us in that way. You can either email, go onto our website, take a picture of this QR code, call us. Just please reach out and we will do our best to connect you to different aspects of support that the program offer. If you feel that you require immediate support, urgent support, at any point in this caregiving journey, or if any of the topics that we discuss bring up a lot of strong feelings for you, please reach out to a crisis helpline such as 988, and please reach out for support at any time. Another aspect of the SCALE program is the workbook that you will be emailed after the webinar. And this is a workbook that you can access at any time and will really expand on some of the aspects that we will talk about each week. If you see the purple icon here, the journal icon, you might see this icon on some of the slides as we move forward in the program today. And this just alerts you to the fact that there is some aspect of that slide that's discussed within the workbook, and an action step or a exercise that you can do afterwards that will really expand on this topic for you. And I'll alert you to some of that as we continue on. So our topic today, as Joy said, is around the feeling of not feeling appreciated. And feeling unappreciated is such a common experience for caregivers. You do so much work and you provide so much care, and it's not recognized and appreciated in the way that you deserve. In fact, at times it might even be criticized. And so I want to just start our webinar today by taking a moment to acknowledge all the caregivers that are here and that might be watching this at a later time. I want to just acknowledge out loud how much you all do. You give so much of yourself, of your time, of your energy, of your heart, of every aspect of yourself, and yet no one really fully appreciates the depth of what you do. There's this invisible weight that you carry around day in and day out, and you're there. You're constantly there, constantly tending to the needs of somebody else, whether you're physically there, whether it's constantly on your mind, often without any break, without any thank yous. And that can feel incredibly isolating and incredibly frustrating. And I want you to know, and I am sure that we can all share in this acknowledgement today, that I see you. If nothing else, I see you. I see that even though it might feel like no one else does, I want you to know that your efforts and your sacrifices and the energy you pour into your caregiving here in this space today are noticed. The emotional labor, the physical labor, it's amazing. It's unbelievable. And I want to acknowledge that for you right now. You deserve to be seen, to be valued, to be validated, to be recognized, to be seen as within all of the giving that you do on a day-to-day and week-by-week basis. And I'm wondering if the caregivers that are here today can just reach out in the chat, and if they can resonate with this, and if they want to show that love and support and appreciation to the other caregivers here, if you can just write a message of, I see you, I hear you, a thumbs up, we see you. Can you share that here? Who can resonate with us? Who wants to share in that love for each other? I appreciate all of you. I see you. You're doing your best. You are all wonderful. Hello, fellow heroes. I love that. I see you all. Blessings to everyone who are doing their best. Amazing. We're here together joining in this caregiving journey, joining in the appreciation for what you're working so hard to do. And I want you to internalize this. We here, the OCO, the other caregivers here, we see you and we see what you're doing. And if you want to take a screenshot of all the ICUs in that chat as a reminder, or whatever you need to do to hold with you in your pocket as you go along from today, to just really internalize that you deserve all of that appreciation, regardless if you're receiving it from your care recipient, from your family members, from the people around you in your life. You deserve the appreciation, and we're sending that to you right now. When you're so dedicated to providing care and service for those around you, and those actions aren't appreciated, it's only natural that you're going to be frustrated and you're going to have feelings of resentment. That's a natural human equation. Dedication plus lack of appreciation is going to equal resentment. That's a normal human experience. And I want you to normalize that for yourselves right now. That's a normal feeling. Of course, you're going to feel frustrated and resentful if you're putting in all this effort that we've just talked about, all this effort that we're acknowledging now, and it's not being appreciated by the people in your life. So how do we turn this equation around? What shift needs to happen in order for us to feel differently within this setting that we're in, within the situation of needing to give and give and give and not being appreciated? The reality is that as long as things stay exactly the way they are right now, we'll continue to feel frustrated and resentment. resentful, will continue to feel unappreciated, right? And sometimes in our dedication, we tend to prioritize the needs of other people so much that we end up neglecting our own well-being. And this is the shift that I want to look at now. This is the shift that I think can make a difference and turn this equation around, like I just asked. There's this voice that we all have in our heads, and it sounds a little bit different for everybody, but this voice sounds something along the lines of, it's not okay to say no. No one else can do this for him or for her. I have to be the one who has to be there. I want to do it all for them. This is the least I can do. I have no choice. Do any of these resonate with you? Do any of these sound like some of the voice that you hear in your head that prevents you from maybe taking care of your own well-being, that causes you to possibly prioritize your care recipient's needs consistently over your own? If anyone can share in the chat, what's the voice that you hear? I have no choice. I'm the only one who can do this, I see. No one else will do the work. It should be my priority. If I don't do it, no one else will. I'm alone. I have no choice. So many different thoughts that are driving this sense of constantly putting our care recipients' needs before our own. I see my needs make me selfish. I'm the next of kin. I have no choice. So there's different aspects of our thoughts. There's different aspects of this mindset that drives so much of how we then turn to behave. But in order for us to feel differently, for this equation to be turned around, there needs to remain a balance between what we're doing for our care recipient and what we're doing for ourselves. And that's actually the way to balance out this equation, right? Dedication and a lack of appreciation equals resentment. If we want to balance out this equation, we need to balance out the care provision between our care recipient and the care provision we're providing for ourselves. Those two need to be on equal front, at least on equal front. But our thoughts, for example, this voice of guilt that I've heard a lot of you name, this voice of a sense of obligation, they get in the way of that, and they prevent us from protecting our time and our energy that we need for ourselves. The thoughts and this voice of, I can't leave them, it's easier if I do it, I don't have time, they're relying on me. All of these thoughts, they prevent us from accessing what we need for ourselves to not feel that resentment. I want to just name a few of these mindsets that we were just referring to and give you some examples. And while I'm going through these, I want you to see if any of these resonate with you, or if what you shared in the chat is something that you notice come up for you a lot, and put that down on paper somewhere for yourself, because that's a really important mindset, a voice to become really familiar with and to notice, because that's this obstacle between us and relating within our caregiving role in a way that's going to allow us to feel fulfilled yet not drained. So some of these mindsets are guilt, obligation, a fear of conflict, self-neglect, and I'm going to give you some examples of these. So within guilt, you might hear a mindset of, if I don't do everything, I'm failing my care recipient, I'm letting them down. And our goal is to try to shift some of these mindsets to allow them to be more balanced, to allow them to not get in the way of us taking care of ourselves. So for example, with this mindset, we might shift to something like, my well-being is crucial for providing the best care. It's okay to set limits to take care of myself so that I'm more effective in my role. So I'm feeling this sense of guilt, And I want to switch that mindset to one that allows me to put boundaries into place, that allows me to set limits to what I am doing for my care recipient. If a sense of obligation is what's driving this mindset, for example, I have to take on all my responsibilities because it's my duty. You might replace that with something like, it's important to balance responsibilities and recognize that asking for help is a part of fulfilling my duty effectively. And I'm just giving you examples here, but I want you to take the mindset that you noticed and try to use these examples to come up with a shift. And feel free to share those shifts in the chat if you come up with one, because those help us, those help other caregivers here come up with a shift for themselves. Perhaps it's fear of conflict, a mindset around not wanting to get into conflict with your care recipient that might be standing in the way. And that might sound like setting boundaries might upset my care recipient. They might upset them or cause conflict there. And that might be getting in the way of you setting the boundaries. And so a shift might sound like healthy boundaries are necessary for maintaining relationships and managing stress. So it's better to address the issues calmly than to avoid them and end up resentful. And so these are just about the things that we tell ourselves, our mindsets around setting limitations within our caregiving role. And the last one is a sense of self-neglect. So you might hear a mindset similar to, my needs will have to wait till my mother or replace the care recipient that you're caring for doesn't need my care. Right now, my care recipient needs me. So you could see how that's a mindset of self-neglect. I'm neglecting myself entirely and only focusing on my care recipient's care. And so shifting that might sound like, caring for myself allows me to be a more effective caregiver. My needs are just as important as those of the person I care for. So these creating boundaries as a caregiver, which is what we're going to move into talking about now, involves adopting an internal language that reinforces a sense of self-respect and self-care. These mindset shifts are about, what messages am I telling myself in order to maintain this balance that we talked about before, a sense of equality between my caregiving responsibilities and my personal well-being. These thoughts, for example, that I just named, they prevent us from protecting our space. They get in the way when we're about to take a break or attend an event that might take us away from our care recipient, or think about, planning a vacation or even a day trip, or taking the time to eat our lunch sitting down as opposed to running around. These thoughts prevent us from setting those boundaries on our time, on our physical space, on our emotional needs. So really try to notice that thought that you have come up with right now and keep it in mind as we learn more about types of boundaries and how they can help us protect our space. So let's take a closer look at boundaries and the different types that there are. So when we talk about boundaries, there's physical boundaries, right, which refer to what you're comfortable with in terms of your own space and your own body. So your physical space, okay? Then there's emotional boundaries, which refer to what you are okay with sharing emotionally with others and what you would like to keep personal to yourself. And then there's time boundaries, which refer to simply, what would I like to prioritize in terms of my time? When would I like to take the time to rest? When do I need time for myself? Boundaries aren't just about telling another person no. The first step of boundary setting starts by really getting a sense of, what am I okay with and what am I not okay with? Both within my physical space, my emotional space, my time-bound space. Boundaries are there for us to clarify for ourselves, where do I end and my care recipient begins within all of these realms. I don't know if anyone here is a fan of Brene Brown like I am, but she talks about how setting boundaries is not about being selfish, which so often is a word that comes up around setting boundaries, but it's actually about choosing self-love and self-respect. And she's done a lot of research actually on the qualities of compassion. And she found that the most compassionate people are the people who are actually the most boundaries, because boundaries allow us to be more generous and kind to others, because they eliminate so much of that resentment that we were talking about earlier. When I've set limitations to what I am and am not okay with, and I've maintained those limitations, I have a lot less resentment. I don't know about you, but I know I'm a much kinder person when I'm not feeling resentful. So boundaries actually allow us to maintain compassion when we clearly define for ourselves the list of what is okay for us, what allows us to stay true to our values and our integrity and our sense of self, and what's not okay for us. But this obviously requires a bit of self-awareness to get clear on what are the things that I'm okay with? What am I comfortable with? What am I not okay with? So we're going to go through a few steps now of how to set boundaries. And you'll see the workbook icon here because there's an aspect of this exercise within the workbook as well to help you really expand on this. But we're going to try to work through some of this together today. So the 3 steps to setting boundaries are: 1, identifying your limits, like we just talked about. What am I okay with and what am I not okay with within those 3 realms that we just named? To set internal boundaries, which we're going to talk more about, not to worry. And then to go ahead and state your needs. So we're going to go through these one at a time now and work through how to do each one. So the first one, identifying your limits. I want to do a short exercise just to clarify for ourselves now. And if you have a pen and paper, great. You can take some time to write this down. And if you don't, again, there is aspects of this within the workbook as well to help you identify these limits for yourself. So if you do have a piece of paper, you can go ahead and draw a large circle. And inside the circle, I want you to write down all the things that I need to protect, all the things that make you feel safe and supported, stress-free, a sense of joy, relaxed within your caregiving role. So these are the things that nourish you emotionally, physically, mentally, that help you feel grounded. They might include something along the lines of taking a walk outside every day, or making sure I eat a nutritious lunch, or touching base with a friend once a day. Having my appointments on certain days of the week, or making sure I go to bed by a certain time, a warm bath, a cup of tea, right? The areas within my caregiving role that help me feel grounded and safe and well overall. And then outside of the circle, I want you to write down everything you are not okay with. Everything within your caregiving role, and take up all the room you want, because I'm sure there's a lot, right? That you are not okay with. Things, people, situations, activities that make you feel uncomfortable, that push your boundaries, that I have a sense I need to adjust in my life. And maybe they've been in the back of my mind for a while. I need to do something about this. And you haven't yet been able to make those adjustments. So for example, doctors that are unclear or rude, feeling pressured to handle caregiving responsibilities after 10 p.m., family members who are critical, friends or family members who might just call you to, ask about your care recipient and be very unsupportive. feeling a certain sense of obligation to attend certain family events. It could be within your caregiving role directly in actions you do, or things that drain you outside of your caregiving role. So getting clear on what I need to protect, what I know is so important to maintaining my emotional stability and physical stability within my life, and things that I know prevent that, right? That I have to keep out of this inner circle. And now once we have a sense of this, and you can continue to work on this after the webinar as well, we want to look at setting internal boundaries that can help us ensure that nice circle, that nice line around the things we need to protect stays stable and secure. Our boundaries are based on our unique personal values. In other words, knowing what is most important to you, right? And once we have a sense of that, we can set internal boundaries of what I will and I won't do based on what you just drew for yourself within that circle. So I'm looking at my values, at my core beliefs, at my cultural beliefs, at the things that I know I need to protect that we just named for ourselves, that we just identified in our circle we need to protect. And I'm identifying, what do I need to make sure I keep safe in my life so that I can move forward within my role? So, for example, if I've identified for myself that sleep is a key area, if I don't get to bed by 10 o'clock, I can't function within my role. So, setting an internal boundary around that will sound like I will not ignore my need for rest or for sleep. I'm clear for myself that is something I need to protect. The I will nots are those things that I need to make sure I protect, those things that I will not allow to get trampled on. Okay. And so if I notice that that's being called into question, an internal boundary that I'm going to set is that I will delegate tasks or find one thing that I'm going to let go of that day in order to prioritize myself and to take a nap. If I'm working, for example, to protect my calm or composure, and that's a value of mine that I've identified, whatever happens in my day, I need to make sure I'm not yelling at my care recipient when I'm frustrated. That is something that I need to make sure for myself, not about them. It's about what I need to protect in my life, right? So an internal boundary I'll set there is to make sure that I'll leave the room or take a walk or a cold drink, for example, just as examples of what I can do to make sure this internal boundary of I will not be yelling. That is not something I want to be doing in my life. Another example might be I've recognized that I need to protect my hobbies and my personal interests. And so I'm setting an internal boundary to say, I will not sacrifice all of my hobbies and my personal interests. I will not do that anymore. That's an internal boundary that I've set. And so I might say, I will schedule time for something that brings me joy. That's the action step that I'm going to take forward now. So let's practice this together because it's, a nice concept, but we need to kind of ground it into what we're doing. And if anyone can share as we go through this exercise now, what they've come up with, I think that will be helpful for everyone here as well. So let's take a minute to fill this out for ourselves. When I notice I'm starting to feel a specific unwanted trigger, for example, I notice I'm getting frustrated. Instead of whatever this unhelpful behavior that comes up for me, raising my voice, for example, I will, you can fill in the blank for yourself, insert a new action or behavior that's more aligned with my values. So I will take a deep breath, walk away for a few minutes to calm myself. Can anyone share in the chat an example for themselves? So, for example, when I notice that I'm starting to feel angry and hurt that my care recipient is acting unkindly, instead of returning that anger, I will remind myself that their behavior is a symptom of their condition, and I'll practice emotional detachment. So that would be an example of how to fill out this exercise. I see someone shared, sometimes when I get really stressed, when I'm repeating myself with my mom, so I tell her I need to go to the washroom so I could take a few minutes to myself. And then I come back with a lower temperature. That's amazing. That's amazing. So you're noticing this unwanted trigger, right? I'm noticing I'm starting to get really stressed. This is not what I want for my life. I want to protect my peace. I want to protect my sense of calm and feeling grounded. And so instead of lashing out, getting upset, getting frustrated, showing that frustration to my care recipient, I'm going to go to the washroom, take a few minutes for myself, and come back with a lower temperature. Another example I see here, when I notice I'm feeling overwhelmed, instead of escalating, I will take a breath and remove myself from the situation. So this is about our internal boundaries. What am I okay with and what am I not okay with? What do I want in my life and what do I not want in my life? What do I want to make sure is protected? And what am I not okay with having in my life at all? Another example I see here is when I feel overwhelmed and sad, rather than continuing to think about it too long, I'll do something nice for myself, such as spend time with my dog, right? So I'm choosing to not allow this emotion to overwhelm me. I'm not allowing this emotion to take up all the space in my life, right? I'm noticing it, it's there for me, but I'm choosing to not sit in it too long. I'm choosing to now go and spend time with something that brings me joy. And these are great examples. And this is a bit of an exercise. And as you saw on the slide before, there is within the workbook, a step-by-step exercise that can help you really clarify for yourselves what are these internal boundaries, right? Another example around guilt. So when I notice that I start feeling guilty, I will not let guilt drive my decisions, right? That's the boundary. I will not let guilt drive my decisions. Rather, I'll remind myself that I'm doing the best I can. And the best thing for my care recipient is to prioritize myself. So these are all different examples of the internal boundary that we first need to be clear on before we express our boundaries. So people often think of boundaries as saying, no, I can't, I'm not. But there's a process that happens before we can even do that, right? And those are the steps that we just talked about. We have to be clear for ourselves on what do I need to protect and what am I not okay with? And then set internal boundaries around those things. What will I do and what will I not do? And the next step after this is stating our needs, stating the need to our care recipient, to our family members, whoever it is that needs our boundary. And it's difficult to state what we want or need, especially when we're dealing with somebody in authority or somebody within a difficult relationship with us. Stating what we want is an essential skill for healthy boundary setting, but it's not easy, right? The main point that I want you to remember is that when I set a boundary, it's not about explaining why this thing is important to me. It's about just clearly stating my need. No further explanation is required when I'm stating my preference or my need. That's my need. I get to protect that. I get to have needs and I get to protect those needs. So using phrases like the ones I'm going to pull up on the screen right now are a way of strongly and confidently, yet respectfully conveying your need. So words like I'd like to, I'd prefer to, I'd rather, I want to, whatever it is works for me, I'm more comfortable with. I've decided that. I can only do this, meet, talk, whatever it is on this specific time or date. This is what's best for me. So you see how clear these statements are. It's not about negotiating. It's not about discussing. It's not about seeing how they feel about it, because we're not talking about things that are, you're okay with. We're talking about the clear areas within your life that you realize I am not okay with. And so there's no negotiation needed there. You're allowed to state something that you're not okay with. So, for example, I want to have some quiet time for myself in the evenings. So I will transfer you to your bed by 7 p.m. I've decided that we're going to limit our visitors to the mornings only, because that will give me a chance to rest in the afternoon. For example, I'd like to take some time this afternoon to rest. So I'll help you with what you need right now, right? I recognize that I need time in the afternoon to rest. And so I need to protect that. That's one of my core needs. That's one of my values or beliefs that I realize I need to protect within that circle. And so I'm now going to be clear around how that's going to happen by stating these needs. Again, as I said before, within the workbook, we have these statements and also a clear exercise to help you reflect on different aspects of boundaries, both the internal and the external. And within the self-reflection questions, there's also another important aspect here, which is when you've now stated your boundary, how did you feel about that? What came up for you as you said that really clear statement? Because for a lot of people, especially in situations where it's really uncomfortable, setting boundaries can make us feel really anxious or guilty about doing so. So this discomfort is really normal. It's hard to make changes to the way that we're interacting with somebody. And so a sense of anxiety or guilt around setting these boundaries, a sense of feeling selfish or wrong for being so clear and taking what you need for yourself is very normal. But it's also really helpful to reflect on that and to, just explore that for yourself, what you're feeling, name those feelings, normalize those feelings. So I encourage you to use that reflection in the workbook around what came up for you when you do set those boundaries. But healthy boundaries are what define us as separate individuals. They're clear, they're unwavering, and they ensure that we get to act as a separate entity, which we are, from our care recipient. It's uncomfortable to be strong like that with somebody, especially when we don't want to be. But it's important to remember that boundaries are not mean. They're simply outlining for another person, this is what I will do, and this is what I won't do. I wanted to give you an example of a caregiver story to help actualize some of this. So I'll tell you a little bit about Emily, who's caring for her mother. And then I'll go through some of the internal and external boundaries that she set in order to shift, the way that she was experiencing her caregiving. Emily felt a very overwhelming sense of responsibility for her mother, Ruth, that she was caring for. Her mother actually didn't live with her. She lived in an assisted living apartment, but she constantly felt an obligation, a duty to rearrange her schedule to address any concern that her mother had. Emily had two young children. She was married. She had other things that she needed to tend to as well, but she just felt such a strong obligation to come to her mother's need whenever she called that something wasn't going right. Her mother might call to say the television isn't working or the PSW didn't come on time. And Emily just felt an obligation, like a sense of responsibility to just address these things right away. This also extended to how she would handle her mother's social interactions. Her mother would often say that she felt lonely or excluded from the group activities. So there was other options available for her mother to socialize, but she just felt like she had to take on that role. She had to make sure that her mother was socializing. And so if her mother wasn't joining the social events, she felt obligated to visit her more, at least, a number of times a week. And whenever she wasn't attending, she felt very guilty about choosing to be home. Or if she felt like she needed to rest on a Sunday, she felt an immense sense of guilt. But what happened as a result is that her time for herself shrunk to almost nothing, and her social life was non-existent, and her husband and kids were suffering in terms of their relationship with her. So there was a clear imbalance to how she was tending for herself and her needs and how she was caring for her mother's needs. There was this constant sense of feeling torn between, all the other needs in her life, and hers weren't even on the table, right? So we talked about some internal boundaries that Emily needed to set for herself before even considering the external boundaries that she would have to state. And some of those she named was, I will not feel guilty for prioritizing my own family's needs, right? So we weren't even up to her own needs yet, but she felt herself feeling guilty for even just going to her husband and children as opposed to her mother's home. And so what she would tell herself there is, so I will not feel guilty for prioritizing my own family's needs. When I choose to spend time with my husband and children, I'll remind myself that my presence with them is just as important as being with my mother. Another example of internal boundaries she set was, I will not drop everything to immediately address every issue my mother brings up. Instead, when my mother calls with a concern, I will assess the urgency before responding. So she created this pause for herself of, is there urgency here? If not, I don't need to feel compelled to fix everything right away. Another important one for her was, I will ask for help when I feel overwhelmed. When I notice I'm stretched too thin, I will seek support from my husband, from my friends, from a professional, rather than trying to manage everything alone. Her mother did live in an assisted living facility, and so there were other people who could step in, but it was the sense of obligation, like we were talking about before, these mindsets. It was the sense of obligation that was preventing her from really leaning into those supports. Some example of external boundaries that Emily could set: setting specific times where she would spend quality time with her family. Naming for her mother, I'd prefer to visit twice a week instead of 4 times a week. I'd rather call you in the evenings to check in rather than visit after work. I've decided that I will no longer manage communication with the care facility staff directly. So these were all external boundaries she set, but only after being really clear on these internal boundaries. When we set boundaries, it's not uncommon for our care recipients to react with frustration, confusion, or even anger. And so the last piece that I just want to name today is the challenge of resistance when we set boundaries. Often our care recipients will get upset, they'll get angry, they don't want us to create these boundaries. They love that we're there for them 24/7. They love that we've set aside everything that we need for them. I tell my clients all the time, nobody who needs a boundary likes a boundary, and don't expect them to. They're not going to like it. But the boundary is not about being mean to them. The boundary is about protecting ourselves, our well-being, and our space. And so some common strategies for addressing this resistance is that clear communication and calm communication that we talked about. These clear statements and the mindset that I don't need to justify a need. I'm human, I have needs. I don't need to justify that need. I just need to communicate it clearly and calmly. Another aspect is being patient and consistent. So understanding that my care recipient or the people in my life will not like this boundary. I can't expect them to. I can't expect them not to retaliate at times. And I just need to be consistent. This is what I'm able to do. This is what I'm not able to do. We can acknowledge their feelings. We can validate the emotions that are coming up for them. We can validate that it's hard, that we're not there as much as we used to. We could understand that that's frustrating for them or difficult for them. We can try to make them feel heard within that, but it doesn't mean we have to change what we've decided, because how we've gotten to this boundary is a really clear process of looking at our core needs. So we're not talking about excess pieces here, right? We're talking about the things that ensure that we are stable within our lives. Another piece, if possible, is that you can involve them in the process. So if you've decided, I see that I can only come and visit 2 days a week, right? Just as an example for somebody that you're caring for outside of your home, or I'll need to take care of this task in the morning and not the evening. You can involve them in that process. Would you prefer that I come on Monday and Wednesday or Thursday and Friday if it doesn't make a difference to you, right? Would you prefer that I do this in the morning or the evening if it doesn't make a difference to you, right? But you're still protecting that core need that you have. And the last piece is mobilize. And what that means is you have the ability to walk away. You have the ability to remove yourself from an interaction with somebody. And this is a boundary in its own right that's become nasty or uncomfortable for you, right? If the person that you're caring for or the other people in your life who you're setting that boundary with start becoming angry or are treating you not nicely, you have the ability to get up and walk away. So navigating the resistance doesn't mean I'm always there to listen to all the pieces of resistance. It means that when I need to, I'll take a step back. So there's a lot of information that we shared today on boundaries, and I want to recognize that it's a lot, and that implementing boundary setting is not easy. And we can probably do an eight-week series just on boundary setting within caregiving. But I want you to just take one last moment to think about one piece from today that you can incorporate for yourself, one takeaway that you can start implementing around boundaries. Maybe it's the realization that, wow, I never realized that boundaries were even an option. I never even realized I could say no to this. Or, maybe I'm just going to interact with myself differently about boundaries. I'm going to start to notice areas in my life that I need to protect. Maybe I've never even noticed that, right? Or maybe it's recognizing whether it was guilt or obligation or self-neglect that is driving my lack of boundary setting. Whatever your take home is from today, just try to notice one piece. And if anyone wants to share that in the chat as we end for today, what their takeaway is, what they want to make sure that they can remember for themselves, that would be great to share with each other. So use this as a starting point. And when you receive the workbook from today's webinar, take a look at the resources, take a look at the other pieces that are there for you to explore boundary setting further. Take a look at the self-discovery questions and try to explore more around how the boundary setting feels for you, and reflect on these pieces. I see now some of you shared. I realize that I don't need to carry around guilt for something I love, which brings me joy. I need to shift my focus to thinking of myself first, even if my needs aren't immediate. I want to be patient and consistent. So these are great. So just note down this takeaway for yourself so that you can continue reflecting on this as you work through some of the workbook exercises. So thank you so much for your time today. And I just wanted to open up the floor for any questions. And I will see you back here again next week for our webinar on creating meaningful connections. Joy, was there any questions that came up in the chat?
Yes, it was very lively, lots of questions and comments. So I'll jump right in if that's okay. One caregiver asked, how do you communicate clearly, set a boundary when your care recipient doesn't understand? So for example, they have a cognitive issue, dementia,
Yeah,
that
yeah,
type
for
of
sure. Thank you for
situation.
that question. That's a very good question. So there's times where we're able to convey these boundaries, and there's times where we're able to share a boundary and that boundary is respected, and it's a really nice, beautiful equation, right? But it's not always the case, right? We're going to have resistance. We're going to be with somebody who can't understand. So the core process of boundary setting is not the externalization of it. It's not the stating of the boundary. The core part of boundary setting is the internal process, is getting really clear for yourself on the pieces in your life that you need to protect and the pieces in your life that you're not okay with. When I set those, I then set up for myself my life in a way that I can and can't handle to the best of my ability. There's always going to be areas where we don't have control over, right? I could absolutely despise hospitals, but I don't really have much of a choice to go there, right? But I could say I'm only going to take appointments on certain days or times. I will take up to 2 appointments a week, but I can't do more than that. Like, there are ways in which we can set limits on some of these pieces. And again, it won't be in every area. There will be things outside of our control. But we want to first ask ourselves and get really clear and grounded on what are those pieces I need to make sure I protect.
Yes. Okay. Great. Thank you so much.
Mhm.
And the next question, I kind of put three caregiver comments together that had a similar theme, and then I just added a question at the end that I think would be helpful. So a caregiver commented, for many of us, it's difficult to get away, whether in home to have a bath or read a book alone, or to actually get out of the house, especially overnight. And another caregiver shared, no matter when I set time for myself, my mother will need a commode trip. These take half an hour. If I don't take care of it, I'll have to deal with the diaper and the bottom cleanup. So I don't see how I can set boundaries around that. And another caregiver commented, these all seem very reasonable, but my father is incredibly unreasonable. And sometimes it feels only meeting him at his level works. So I'm just wondering if you can speak to the caregivers who have practical issues preventing them from setting and maintaining healthy boundaries.
Yeah, for sure. And there will be practical things that get in the way of us wanting to um, touch point for our needs, right? There will be practical things. We can plan this really nice, healthy lunch for ourselves, and then, disaster strikes, and that doesn't actually get fulfilled in the way that we want it to. So again, I want to shift that focus away from this specific practical situation and zooming back and out towards what are my core needs around this, right? It's not necessarily about this bath. That might be something that I realize brings me peace, but it's more about accessing myself, challenging these internal voices, these mindsets that are preventing me from setting boundaries, right? So I think when we notice that there's a lot of practical things getting in the way, we want to take a few steps back and see, have we addressed the mindset first? Because if we haven't addressed the mindset first, we're not aware, we're not being cognizant of the real inhibitors for us, right? Is there support out there, even for half an hour, that I'm not stepping away when they're there, right? That happens a lot. Like we'll have somebody there for half an hour, but we feel this sense of obligation to take care of 5 other caregiving tasks when that person is there with our care recipient. And maybe taking a step back, we might say, you know what? That's my only time. And if that's my only time, then 2 other things might have to get off the list. So there's a real self-introspection here to be able to widen that view a little bit and see what the options are. But I really do encourage you to go through the steps in the workbook, because I think it will help you really break this apart and see if there's even these small windows, right? We don't need massive changes in order to feel like we're caring for ourselves, but we just need to insert a little bit of balance, right? So maybe in that moment, to take care of a physical need for your care recipient, maybe in that exact moment there isn't so much room in that moment. So then let's zoom out. Where within the week is there room, right? So zoom out of those moments into a bigger picture of meeting my needs overall would be my advice.
Yeah, I think that's great insight. And I can definitely relate to feeling like there's no time.
Yeah.
But, even in my own situation, I found right after I gave my dad his shower, he would be kind of happy and content for about 15 minutes. You know, it felt nice to be back in his chair or in his bed, and I could take 15 minutes just to myself. And you're right. I think we think about it as this big thing or, a big boundary, but it might just be 10 or 15 minutes that you can just take for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it can be hard to see when you're in the thick of it.
It's very hard to see when you're in the thick of it. Yeah. Like
Yeah.
we can acknowledge that. It's not easy. And I hope I'm not at all minimizing that struggle for anybody of those moments to moments where you just need to breathe and it feels like there's no space to breathe. Right. And that's why I want you to reflect on, what's happening internally there. Like, am I leaning into a sense of guilt or obligation or self-neglect to a place that it's hurting me, that it's not allowing me to take, like you said, those tiny little 15 minutes that you found? Something can get in the way there too if we're not aware of ourselves, right?
Mhm.
And of what we need.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Michal, for this important discussion around boundary setting and the practical tools that will help us establish these healthier boundaries. I think this was perfect follow-up to last week's discussion on rediscovering ourselves. So
Mhm.
thank you so much. And thank you to everyone who joined us today.
Thank you, Joy. Thank you, everyone.